So hello friends, let us begin this topic formally with the very basic idea that you are supposed to have regarding the endocrine glands inside the human body. So see, let us imagine, the whole story is starting from a very basic concept of endocrine gland and the substance they are producing. So gland means it is a tissue, isn't it? Gland means it is a group of cells, obviously, so it is a tissue which is organized in some way that it secretes certain substances. The cells which are there inside the gland will synthesize and secrete certain substances, and these substances are called by the name of hormones. Okay, so these are the name of the substances which are produced. This is what we actually say for the the substance produced by these endocrine glands. Now if I tell you that I have a gland here, okay, this is some part of my body where I have a gland. So this is my gland and I have a target here. This is my target organ, target tissue, where the substance that is produced by the gland has to act. Okay, so a substance is produced by this particular gland and this substance is filling over here inside the gland, and this gland has to take its substances, it has to send the substance into the target, which is somewhere else, okay, somewhere else, just near to it or distant from it, wherever it is. It has to make sure that the substance is reaching this particular target for this particular substance to act on that particular target. So there are two ways by which it can be done. Either this gland itself has a conduit like this. It has a small tube like structure, which will take the secretions into the target. Okay, so this gland has a tube which is there inbuilt, through which this substance can go into the target. So whenever the target needs the substance can be transported directly into the target through a direct tube which will connect the gland to the target. Now this tube is called by the name of duct. Okay, so whenever you hear the word duct, remember that it is a tube that connects a gland to a target, where the substance produced from the gland has to travel through it and act on the target. This is the basic idea of a duct. So let us suppose, if I give you an example, if this is the parotid gland. So parotid gland is a salivary gland which is present over here, isn't it? Just in front of the paraotid. So this means the ear, and just near to it, there you have this particular parotid gland over here. Okay, so from there the saliva comes over here, the secretion is the saliva, and that goes all the way into the target, and this target is the mouth. Okay, now what is this duct called as? This duct is the Stenson's duct. The special name given to the duct of parotid gland is Stenson's duct. Okay, so this is the basic idea of calling, this is the basic idea of a normal gland inside the body. Now what does these type of glands called as? These types of glands are called by the name of exocrine glands. Okay, so these glands are called by the name of exocrine gland. That means this exocrine gland has a duct. So this duct is what is actually defining an exocrine gland. Whenever somebody asks you what is an exocrine gland, exocrine glands are those glands which has a duct for the transport of the substances synthesized by the gland into the required target. Directly through the duct it can be transported. Whereas you have certain other types of glands inside the human body. These are called by the name of endocrine gland, and these endocrine glands are those glands which are ductless. So the basic defining criteria for calling a gland as an exocrine gland and an endocrine gland is based on the presence or absence of a duct, and this duct is a channel through which the secretions can be transported. So you have a normal gland over here, through this particular duct it can be transported to the target, and I give you an example of parotid gland. Now in case of an endocrine gland, how can the secretions reach the required target without a kind of duct? Through what portal is it going into the required target? And the answer to that is obviously the blood. So what it does is that it gives its secretions into the blood. So if this is an endocrine organ, endocrine gland, e.g. endocrine gland. So you have a blood vessel which is running next to it, right? So it synthesizes, stores and secretes its secretions into the blood vessel. So this is your blood vessel. Okay, so through this the secretions will go, and finally this blood vessel will take it to the required target. This is the target. So through the blood, the secretions, that means whenever I talk about endocrine gland, the secretions are called by the name of hormones. So the hormones will reach into the target through the blood. So blood is the portal through which the endocrine organs, endocrine glands will transport its secretions, which are called by the name of hormones, into the required targets. Now here an interesting feature is that when you talk about an exocrine gland, say you have the salivary glands, isn't it? Salivary glands are present on your face. I mean on the, this part of the body, that is face. Some part of this particular anterior aspect of the body where you have the salivary gland. Where is the saliva acting? Just inside the mouth, isn't it? So these glands are present over here. This gland has to, transport the secretions to a nearby distant target. I mean nearby target. The target is the mouth and the glands are situated very near the target, isn't it? But in case of endocrine gland, like you say the thyroid gland, okay, endocrine pancreas, you can talk about adrenal glands. So these are certain glands which are located at some part of the body, but the targets are elsewhere, isn't it? It is very distant from the gland. Like thyroid hormone, whatever hormone is produced by the thyroid gland has to act at a very distant site other than some nearby sites of the thyroid gland. So that is why it cannot have a very big duct. There are no big ducts that are connecting the thyroid to direct areas. Moreover, this hormones that are produced by the endocrine glands has multiple sites of action in the body, not just a single site. See, parotid gland has to secrete the saliva into the mouth only, but thyroid gland has to secrete the thyroid hormone so that it reaches all parts of the body, and whichever parts of the body are requiring it, it has to reach everywhere. So you cannot have multiple channels like this from the gland connecting to everywhere. So that will make everything very complicated, and that is not how nature has made us. So for that particular matter, it just secretes its secretions into the blood, and this blood, wherever it goes, this hormone also goes over there, and wherever the hormone has to bind, wherever the hormone has to act, the hormone will act over there. So this is the basic idea that you're supposed to have. I hope you have got a crude idea of how an endocrine system in the body works. Okay, so please make sure that you know the concept of an exocrine gland, endocrine gland. Okay, so by the time we complete this particular chapter, we will be talking about each and every endocrine organs in the body. Thus you will have a good idea of how each and every hormones are acting. Fine. So next concept is a very basic idea of regulation of endocrine glands. Okay, so we need to have a master control over the endocrine glands inside the body. There are many endocrine glands in the body: pituitary, hypothalamus, thyroid, thymus, parathyroid. Then you have the adrenal gland, testes and ovary. So these are located at multiple sites of the body, isn't it? So you have to have some kind of a master control for the endocrine glands which are present inside the body. They should be controlled and coordinated for the perfect functioning of these particular glands. See, nothing cannot be given, nothing can work in 100% best way without a good control over it. So in case of endocrine system also, you have a good control, a good hierarchy of control for the perfect functioning of the endocrine gland. So if you talk about an endocrine gland over here, okay, let this be an endocrine gland. It can be anything, okay, except the pituitary and hypothalamus. It can be anything, like say it is the adrenal gland or testis or ovary, or the thyroid gland, parathyroid gland, thymus, whatever it is. This is an endocrine gland. Now this endocrine gland is under the regulation of this endocrine gland is under the regulation of the pituitary gland. Okay, so technically this pituitary is also called by the name of hypophysis. Okay, so pituitary will secrete certain substances. Is pituitary an endocrine gland? Yes, pituitary is an endocrine gland. So pituitary will secrete hormones, and these hormones control the endocrine glands, other endocrine glands of the body. So this is a controller kind of a organ. So pituitary will secrete hormones which will control the other endocrine organs in the body. Now there is another control over here also, even superior to this. This is the next level of control, and that is something that controls the pituitary itself, and this is your hypothalamus. Okay, so hypothalamus also is an endocrine gland. So this hypothalamus will secrete certain hormones which will act on the pituitary, which will control the pituitary, and this pituitary in turn will control the endocrine glands of the body. Thus I can say hypothalamus is the chief or the master controller of the supreme controller of the endocrine system of the body. So this is the supreme controller. Okay, so if this is the parliament, then this is the legislative assembly. So hypothalamus is the parliament or the supreme controller, and yes, this is the state legislative assembly, that is pituitary. So hypothalamus will control the pituitary through its hormones, and pituitary will control the rest all endocrine organs in the body, right? So this is what is called by the name of the this concept is called by the name of hypothalamo pituitary axis. Right? So this is how we will call it, hypothalamo-pituitary organ axis. So if I am actually considering the thyroid only, then I will write here thyroid gland. So you can call it by the name of hypothalamo-pituitary thyroid axis. If I am studying about the adrenal gland, I would write adrenals here. Okay, so you'll call it by the name of hypothalamo-pituitary adrenal axis. So hypothalamo-pituitary organ axis, hypothalamo-pituitary thyroid axis, hypothalamo-pituitary adrenal axis, hypothalamo-pituitary testis axis. So this particular way you can just make a good representation of the actual regulation and control of the endocrine glands, okay, which are there inside the human body. So the control or the regulation of the endocrine gland is through this particular axis. So whichever endocrine organ you are considering, just plug in the name of that organ over here and you can call it by this particular format: hypothalamo-pituitary adrenal axis, hypothalamo-pituitary ovarian axis. So these are certain, regulation mechanism that are there inbuilt inside the human body for the proper and for the correct maintenance and for the correct functioning of the endocrine glands. So it has to secrete the required amount of substances in the required way in the required time. So that is through this particular regulation format I have just represented over here. So please make it a point to know this in the best possible way. Now let us go to the next topic, and that is we are beginning with the the first organ that you are supposed to remember, and that is hypothalamus. So the first gland that we are supposed to talk about is the hypothalamus, and as we know, I just discussed with you that this is the supreme controller because this controls pituitary, and the pituitary controls every other endocrine organ of the human body. So therefore hypothalamus is the actual basic controller of all the endocrine system inside the human body, the entire endocrine system of the human body. Thus we will call it by the name of the supreme controller, right? Now this is the image that is given in NCERT just to show you where the hypothalamus is actually lying. So it can be a bit confusing just by looking at this particular image here. So like remember that in this image that is there inside the topic, in the topic of chemical coordination and integration, this image, you don't have thalamus. They haven't marked the thalamus in this particular image. So if this image comes in your practice test, do remember that in this particular image in the head region only 3 things are marked here. Hypothalamus, this is one thing, right? Hypothalamus you need to know. Then you have the pituitary gland, and then you have the pineal gland. Remember, hypothalamus is controlling the pituitary. How did we make the chart? We put the hypothalamus on top, we put the pituitary just below it, and then all the organs below that. The same hierarchy can also be used for the purpose of knowing here, isn't it? So this particular area that I am just demarcating over here, this is the pituitary area. This particular area is the pituitary area. Now just on top of that you have the hypothalamus. Is that the exact set of hypothalamus? Can I be more specific in that? Yes, you can be more specific, or a better image could have been given. But this image, in this particular image, we are supposed to know that only 3 things are marked. Otherwise you will get confused. If I say that, if you get confused, like is it thalamus or hypothalamus, they just give you this particular image and then they mark A over here, and they don't tell you anything else, and then they ask you which is the mark structure. Then you should be in a position to say that this is not thalamus, because thalamus is not given in this particular image, but hypothalamus, since it is given in this particular image, I will go with hypothalamus. So remember, in this particular head area only three things are marked here: hypothalamus here, then at the base there is pituitary, and on the back side you have a pineal gland. So these are the three important markings that are there inside this particular image. Okay, so this is how we will actually learn the NCERT image. It is a bit tough. We are supposed to know what is actually marked over there. This is not conceptual, this is just by hearting. That is the point, that is the problem with respect to NCERT images. Many times you will get confused with that particular way in which it is drawn over here. Okay, so where will I actually mark thalamus over here? Just above the hypothalamus it has to be marked. If thalamus would have been marked over here, somewhere over here, as per what is given in this particular image, I will be marking thalamus above the hypothalamus, somewhere over there. Okay, so this is a, I can say some 80% 70% correct image. Like pineal gland is, yeah, and hypothalamus. So this is how the whole thing has been marked over here. Now when I went for the practice test while I was in class 11th, they gave a question that they were talking about hypothalamus in that particular question. They gave a description of hypothalamus in the question. They said that this is a gland which secretes these and these type of hormones. It has these type of effects. Identify the hormone from the given image. I mean, identify the gland from the given image. So from the description I could make that it is hypothalamus that they are talking about. Right, and then they gave this particular image for for the question in that particular exam. So let us enlarge this and see what this is all about. So this is the image from the topic of neural control and coordination, where exactly the topic of brain is discussed in NCERT, and they give this particular image with none of these markings, and they marked multiple areas in this particular image, and they gave numbers for them, and they asked us to identify that particular organ from this particular image over here. So it is imperative that we also discuss this particular image. I actually cite this particular image in this particular topic as well. So remember that pituitary, if you talk about that particular chapter of neural control coordination, we will say that pituitary is a stalk-like structure. Some stalk-like structure, that is a bulge structure that is coming out of the. So pituitary is at the bottom, so I can very easily cite the pituitary over this particular area. This particular structure, that is a stalk-like structure which is coming out and it ends in a bulge, that is the pituitary at the lowermost part. And as I was telling you, this particular area of the brain is called by the name of diencephalon. Right? This is the diencephalon. So it has all these parts over here. See, now pituitary is connected to the hypothalamus. Why? Because it is under control of hypothalamus. Hypothalamus controls the pituitary. So pituitary is below, hypothalamus should be above. So that is why I can say that this part is the hypothalamus. See, if you carefully see this particular image, if I just rub off all these markings, this is the pituitary, this particular area is the pituitary that I am just marking with red. This bulge over here is the pituitary, and this is the stalk that is connecting the pituitary with the hypothalamus. Hypothalamus is just over here. Right? Hypothalamus is there, there is a stalk-like structure, then there is a pituitary gland. This is how the whole thing is arranged. So hypothalamus above, pituitary below. So thus you will be in a position to understand which is hypothalamus, which one is pituitary. Now, I was telling you that hypothalamus is actually located at the basal part of diencephalon, right? So we have just noted it over there. Where exactly is the hypothalamus located? With this much of information, you will be in a position to decipher the location of hypothalamus. So hypothalamus is located at the basal part of, I mean towards below, isn't it? Below, at the lower part of diencephalon. Right? So this is a very important image of NCERT that you are supposed to remember. You should be in a position to remember each and every parts that are marked over here. You should not have any confusion in marking the correct organs which are present over there. So thus I can very clearly tell you that this is the hypothalamus over here, this is the pituitary over here. Fine. And whatever lies above hypothalamus. See, the word hypo in biology, when you talk about the word hypo, it simply means below. So when I say hypothalamus, it simply means below thalamus. Hypothalamus means below thalamus. So what is above hypothalamus? Hypothalamus is below thalamus. So above hypothalamus is thalamus. So that is why thalamus is above and hypothalamus is below. Below hypothalamus is pituitary. Thalamus, hypothalamus, pituitary. Thalamus, below thalamus is hypothalamus and below that is pituitary, because these two things are connected. It has to be controlled in the particular way. And here comes the epithalamus or the pineal gland. So these are the parts of the brain that you are supposed to remember. So this area you need to focus on in that image which is given over there. Fine. Now in the hypothalamus you have the neurons, isn't it? The whole brain is made up of neurons. The hypothalamus is a part of brain, so hypothalamus is also made up of neurons. Now these neurons have a special function of secreting the hormones. That is why you will call them as the neurosecretory cells. Okay, so what do I mean by this? Neurosecretory cells are those cells which are neurons, but they have a secretory effect also. They are secreting something. Now, what are they secreting? Hormones they are secreting. Now, where are these hormones located? In the hypothalamus. So, the hormones of hypothalamus are actually secreted by the neurosecretory cells of the hypothalamus, which are certain specialized neurons for the purpose of secreting. Now, if I start talking about the hormones that are secreted by the hypothalamus, a complete picture of the function of the hormones will be dealt with the next lecture, that is the lecture on pituitary. Now, there are certain hormones which are called by the name of releasing hormones. Okay, these are called by the name of releasing hormones. Right? Then you have certain hormones called by the name of inhibitory hormones. Okay, so these will act on the anterior pituitary. So these will act on the anterior pituitary. Okay, and finally you have two other hormones here, and these are the oxytocin, and you have something called by the name of vasopressin. Okay, so this is also called by the name of ADH. Okay, so this is anti-diuretic hormone. Okay, now I hope you got it. So these are all the types of hormones that are produced by them, produced by the hypothalamus. So hypothalamus secretes certain hormones which will actually activate the pituitary. So the pituitary will release its own hormones. Fine. So those are called by the name of releasing hormones. What I mean to say is that hypothalamus will secrete certain group of hormones which are called by the name of releasing hormones. This will act on the pituitary, and the pituitary will release its own secretions. To actually activate the pituitary to release pituitary secretions is what is meant by releasing hormones. Now if the hormone produced by hypothalamus inhibits the pituitary from releasing its own hormones, we call it by the name of inhibiting hormones. Both these will act on the anterior pituitary. Now oxytocin and vasopressin are these two hormones which will act on, so both of them will act on the posterior pituitary. Okay, so pituitary can be divided into anterior and posterior parts. Okay, then you have a middle part also. Now these are all the hormones that are produced by them. But now, as I was telling you, the neuron, which is called by the name of neurosecretory cell, the nuclei. So these are called by the name of nuclei. Okay, so the neurosecretory cells of the hypothalamus, which will secrete the hormones, are called by the special name of nuclei. So you are supposed to know the nuclei that secretes oxytocin and vasopressin. Okay, so in oxytocin you have this O here, isn't it? So that is why the name of the nuclei that produces oxytocin is supra-optic nuclei. Okay, now you have a V over here. So this is para-ventricular nuclei. Okay, if you get confused with what is what, see here there is an O and here comes the V here. Okay, so yeah, V for paraventricular, oxytocin supra-optic. So this is how you will remember this. So this is the name of the nuclei. Nuclei is the neurosecretory group of cells. right, that will secrete oxytocin, and this is the name of the group of nuclei in the hypothalamus which will secrete vasopressin. Fine. Now these oxytocin and vasopressin will go to the pituitary and it will be stored over there. It does not activate or deactivate pituitary. It will be just stored over there, and the pituitary will release these two, oxytocin and vasopressin, as its own secretions. So this is all dealt in the next lecture with respect to pituitary. Now that will be a prolonged lecture. We'll be covering almost all the concepts over there, and then we will link the activation and deactivation of the pituitary by the hypothalamus and the effects of the hypothalamic hormones in the pituitary. So these things will become more clear in the next lecture. So with that, I am coming to the I'm going to conclude this video. So if you like this, please like, share and subscribe to my channel. If you click the bell icon, you will be getting notified whenever I upload a new video on YouTube. Thank you.